In the headlines, South Korea calls Pyongyang's verbal assault on President Park as rude, while the U.S. holds a carrot out to North Korea in the form of a non-aggression agreement. Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics predicts a record operating profit of $9.5 billion for the third quarter, which represents a 25% on-year jump. Plus, a boat tragedy in Italy. More than 300 people drowned or feared dead after a boat packed with African migrants capsized and caught fire off the coast of the country. Well, these stories and more next on Primetime News. Good evening and welcome to Primetime News. It's Friday, October 4th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Yoo Ji-hae.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thank you so much for joining us. We begin this evening with the latest tit-for-tat between the two Koreas. South Korea says North Korea's latest verbal attack on President Park Geun-hye is extremely regrettable.
The Unification Ministry said Friday that there has been no case in which a country has insulted another nation's leader with offensive words, classifying the act as both unreasonable and rude. The remarks came after North Korea's National Defense Commission lashed out at President Park Geun-hye earlier today, referring to her by name, and said her goal of joining forces with foreign powers to denuclearize the North will ultimately fail. At an Armed Forces Day ceremony earlier this week, the South Korean leader called on Pyongyang to give up its nuclear program while reiterating Seoul's commitment to developing a strong defense capability against North Korea. Now, meanwhile, Washington has expressed a willingness to engage with Pyongyang.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said his country is ready to sit down with the North for talks and would be open to a non-aggression agreement should the reclusive state first agree to end its nuclear program. Hwang Sung-yi has more on the offer.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has extended a carrot to North Korea, saying Washington is prepared to change its relationship from confrontation to cooperation. At a press conference in Tokyo on Thursday, Kerry said the U.S. is seeking a peaceful relationship with the North, not a regime change, and that it is prepared to sign a non-aggression agreement if North Korea decides to denuclearize. The treaty would have both nations agree to avoid war and to resolve disputes through negotiations. In 2003, Pyongyang told Washington it would eventually eliminate its nuclear program if the two sides were to sign a non-aggression treaty. Kerry's eye-opening offer comes amid fresh signs that North Korea may be actively working on its nuclear program. Former U.S. nuclear negotiator Robert Einhorn said sanctions will not be enough to stop the regime from developing nuclear weapons.
And with the support that North Korea gets from its large, important neighbor, it's very hard for sanctions to be imposed in a decisive way. At the end of the day, if North Korean behavior is to be changed, it will require strong cooperation with China.
Secretary Kerry also noted that the North has behaved outside the standards of the rule of law and reiterated that Washington will not be pulled into another round of negotiations that go around in a circle and buy the North more time to develop its nuclear program. Hwang Sung-yi, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye will embark on an 8-day visit to Southeast Asian countries, including Brunei and Indonesia, on Sunday.
She's set to attend key regional summits and promote her sales diplomacy. Our presidential office correspondent Oh Jin-ju has the details of the upcoming trip.
President Park's trip to the Southeast Asian region will be dominated by a central theme: sales diplomacy. In meetings with leaders of the 21 APEC member countries and 10 ASEAN member states during her stay in Indonesia and Brunei, President Park aims to boost her policy goals of economic revitalization and job creation through diplomatic exchange. In a keynote speech at a CEO summit that she will give upon her arrival in Bali on Sunday, the president is expected to introduce the Korean government's key economic policies and its efforts to ease regulations to attract foreign investment. During the Korea-ASEAN Summit scheduled for Wednesday in Bandar Seri Begawan, Brunei, President Park and the leaders of the ASEAN member countries will discuss ways to further strengthen their economic cooperation. ASEAN has become Korea's key economic partner over the years, as it is the second largest market in bilateral trade for Korea and the biggest market for Korean investment. President Park's state visit to Indonesia also falls in line with her economic emphasis on the ASEAN region, which has emerged as a so-called post-BRICS bloc. Indonesia's population and economy are the biggest among the ASEAN member nations, which is why President Park chose it as the next destination for her sales diplomacy pitch following Vietnam last month. She's scheduled to hold a bilateral summit with Indonesian President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono next Saturday, when she will seek ways to strengthen and expand the two countries' cooperation in the industries of energy, the environment, and forestry. One of her key goals during her state visit to Jakarta is securing Indonesian government support for Korean companies seeking to participate in major national projects, such as the construction of Sunda Strait Bridge and Sukarno-Hatta Airport Railway. Oh Jun-ju, Arirang News.
Another record-breaking quarter from Samsung Electronics. The company's operating profit is estimated to have hit an all-time high of $9.5 billion in the third quarter.
This all thanks to a spike in chip prices and a high demand for smartphones. Our Yoo Ji-hae reports.
Despite market expectations of a slowing smartphone industry, Samsung Electronics has done it again. It hit yet another record high in operating profit in the third quarter of this year. The electronics giant estimates that its operating profit rose to a record 10.1 trillion won, which is roughly $9.5 billion in the July to September period. That's up 25% from the same period last year. The figures stand in contrast to earlier market projections. F&Guide had previously predicted the company's operating profit would hover near $9.2 billion. Meanwhile, the company's sales in the third quarter came in at an estimated $55 billion, up 13% from a year earlier and another record high. Market analysts attribute the record earnings to increasing chip prices and smartphone sales. The semiconductor market has been experiencing a supply crunch since September, after the world's number 2 chipmaker SK Hynix had one of its factories burned down. That led the price of semiconductors to rise by 40% over the past month. But it was a rise in smartphone sales that was the biggest surprise, as it came in the face of an increasingly saturated smartphone market and dwindling growth momentum.
When the actual numbers come out, we expect that sales of the Galaxy S4 will have dropped in the past quarter. But Samsung has now proven that it can drop profits from its low-end models, and not just from the high-end Galaxy S series or its Note.
Experts see Samsung Electronics posting another record operating profit in the fourth quarter. While they expect high marketing costs ahead of Black Friday and the holiday seasons in the October to December period to narrow the profit margin, they say higher chip prices will make up the difference and drive up operating profits to yet another record high. Yoo Ji-hae, Arirang News.
Before your day ends and another begins, get the latest news live from Seoul.
Residents whose features
restrictions is on the rise.
closing ceremony.
Expert analysis from Asia's heartbeat.
The legislature circumstances.
With a viewpoint only Korea's global network can provide.
The United States, the latest report, less than
Unrivaled access from a team always on standby.
Came on maneuver trying to cover up the South's true intentions.
While the U.S. government shutdown grinds on in the United States, economic policymakers around the world are calling on U.S. politicians to act urgently to raise the U.S. debt limit to prevent chaos in financial markets. Kim Min-ji has the details on America's next fiscal challenge.
Top policymakers in the U.S. and around the world have voiced concern that a failure to raise the U.S. debt ceiling could bring catastrophic consequences for the global economy, far surpassing the effects of the current U.S. government shutdown. Speaking ahead of annual World Bank and International Monetary Fund meetings in Washington next week, IMF head Christine Lagarde said that it is mission critical to resolve the issue as soon as possible and that the U.S. government needs to fix its finances for the long term. Meanwhile, U.S. Treasury Secretary Jacob Lew has repeatedly said that the U.S. will run out of cash to pay its bills on October 17th, which the U.S. Treasury claims could lead to a financial crisis as bad as 2008 or even worse. Economists fear that a failure to raise the debt limit could send a shock through Wall Street and a surge in borrowing costs for businesses and households. The calls to raise the debt ceiling come as there appears to be no end in sight to the shutdown of the U.S. government caused by a budget standoff between U.S. President Barack Obama and Congress. Stretching into its fourth day, it has left more than 700,000 federal employees on unpaid leave and closed national parks, offices, and critical government services. House Speaker John Boehner has reportedly told his colleagues that he will not allow the U.S. to default on its debt, and he is willing to do all that he can to avoid it. One U.S. lawmaker who spoke to the New York Times on the condition of anonymity said that Boehner was willing to pass a debt limit increase despite opposition by conservative Republicans. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Turning now to a tragic boat disaster in Europe. More than 300 people are dead or missing after a crowded boat caught fire and sank off the coast of Italy. Our Son Jung-in reports.
A ship heading toward the Italian island of Lampedusa sank just 1 kilometer offshore on Thursday. The ship was carrying a group of African migrants from Tripoli seeking a better life in Europe. Italian officials say at least 130 people have died and scores more are missing after the overcrowded fishing boat caught fire following an engine failure and sank. Around 500 people were believed to be on board, including 30 children and 3 pregnant women.
Once the fire started, there was a concern about the boat sinking, and everyone moved to one side, causing the boat to go down. And hundreds of people on board went into the water.
The disaster happened just 4 days after 13 people drowned off eastern Sicily when a ship carrying around 450 Syrians ran aground, forcing some 200 people on board to swim to the coast. The rising global phenomenon of people from Africa and the Middle East trying to reach Europe via Italy is a growing concern, as most of the ships are often dangerously overcrowded. Pope Francis offered his condolences to the victims and their families and said he felt great pain for the many victims of the latest tragic shipwreck. He called on international organizations to come up with a solution to help prospective migrants find safer places to stay. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
And back here in the country, the skies of Seoul are going to light up on Saturday thanks to the Seoul International Fireworks Festival. Around 1 million people are expected to gather for this year's event in Yeouido, and organizers suggest that watchers show up well in advance of the 7 p.m. start time and use public transportation. Now, you might want to avoid the roads from the intersection of the Mapo Bridge near Yeouinaru Station to the festival site, as it will be restricted several hours before, during, and after the show. On now to yet another event taking place this weekend, one where you can smell, see, and most importantly, taste different foods from all around the globe. A major international food festival, the 2013 Asio Gusto, is being held for the first time in Asia, right here in Korea. Our Kanye Lee reports from the scene.
From slowly cooked barbecue to the making of traditional Korean rice cakes, it's all about appreciating so-called slow foods here at the 2013 Asio Gusto.
I wanted to try out different foods from all over the world, and I thought this was a good event for introducing the kids to different foods and other cultures.
Held in Namyangju, a city just east of Seoul, is the first slow food festival to be held in the Asian and Oceania region in partnership with Slow Food International.
Our city is known for promoting organic foods, and with this clean air and environment, it matches well with the ideology of slow foods. We thought it was only appropriate to hold Asia's first slow food festival in Namyangju.
Visitors here are able to get a taste and experience different slow foods or healthy foods prepared in eco-friendly and natural ways.
These are Mongolian dumplings called hoshorle. They're similar to Korean dumplings, except these have more meat, usually either beef or lamb.
40 countries from Taiwan to Iran are represented this year, each promoting and sharing their traditional foods and unique food items from their country. Take, for example, this jam made from rose petals.
It is special wild rose from Azerbaijan, from the Shirvan region of Azerbaijan, from the forest of the Shirvan region.
This year's Slow Food Festival comes to an end this Sunday, but looking forward, city officials plan to hold this event every 2 years. Connie Lee, Arirang News, Namyangju.
Well, last night, the 18th Busan International Film Festival opened to crowds of global film buffs who will have the next 9 days to spoil themselves with hundreds of movies and numerous presentations and workshops.
To tell us how to best enjoy the festival, we connect to film critic Pierce Conran, who is at the heart of the action. So, Pierce, does it feel like Cannes down there in Busan? What's the mood like?
Well, it's very exciting. Does it feel like Cannes? I wouldn't be able to answer that question. Unfortunately, I've never been there, though that's somewhere it's a destination that I hope to go to very soon. But it is very exciting. It was the opening night last night, so there was the gala premiere of the opening film Vara, a Blessing from Bhutan. A lot of stars came down, all dressed to the nines, gracing the red carpet. So it's all been very exciting so far. There's lots of parties and events lined up over the weekend, and this happens all across Haeundae and the Centum City area. So it's a very big event, and it feels very big.
We also understand that 2 top Korean actors are making their directorial debuts in Busan. Is there any buzz surrounding their projects among all the films out there?
Well, people are very, very curious about these films. It's always interesting to see if an actor that you like can become a good director as well. On the one hand, they seem to have the perfect experience. They've been working with directors all their lives, but these transitions don't always work. This year, we do have 2, and people are very, very curious about these films. One of them is called Fasten Your Seatbelt. It's by the very charismatic, popular actor Ha Jung-woo, who starred in this year's The Berlin File and The Terror Alive. This is his first time writing and directing a film. He made it quite quickly, and it was shot in a fairly low budget. It's kind of an action comedy set in the plane where kind of a Hallyu wave star is returning from Japan, and a typhoon, there's a typhoon during the flight, and there's a fear that the flight is going to go down. So it becomes kind of this hectic comedy aboard the flight. The other one is called Top Star by the actor Park Jong-hoon, who was an enormous star throughout the 80s and 90s, and he got his start in films like Chilsu and Mansu and Black Republic, and then 2 Cops in the 90s. He's an enormous star, and this is his first time directing a film, so and this is about the industry as well, so it's kind of self-reflexive, so he's really kind of drawing on his experience. So I'm very curious, and I know many other people are curious to see if they can make a successful transition to behind the camera.
Well, BIFF has really been fashioning itself into a hub for Asian cinema instead of just Korean cinema. What do you think of the festival's choices this year?
I think it's very, very broad, very eclectic. It's very exciting. And then there's also the problem where there's so much on offer that you know that a lot of the great stuff that is there you won't be able to see, no matter how many films you have the time to check out. Regarding the Asian films, they've really kind of gone out of their way to have a very deep, wide program of Asian cinema. There's even a section this year on lesser-known Asian cinema from kind of Middle Asian countries such as Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. So those are films countries that we haven't really seen films from before, most of us anyway. So people are very curious about those. And then there's an enormous amount of films from Southeast Asia this year. Countries like Thailand and Taiwan and the Philippines have been making very exciting films these last few years, and they seem to have very significant representations at the festival.
Well, lastly, Pierce, before we let you go, we understand that Im Kwon-taek, one of the most respected filmmakers in Korea, will be honored with a substantial retrospective of his work. It must be exciting to see these gems again on the big screen.
It certainly is. This is an enormous retrospective. He's a legend of the industry. He's seen by many as the godfather of today's Korean film industry. He's made 101 films, which is a stunning amount. He's been making films since the 60s. He's reinvented himself, as well as the Korean film industry as a whole, time and time again. So we have 70 films on offer this year. And also today, he had a press conference announcing that he's going to make his 102nd film. So who knows when he'll stop.
All right, thanks, Pierce. Sounds like it's a real big blast out there. That was Pierce Conran, film critic at Twitch Film and Modern Korean Cinema.
October in the United States means playoff baseball, and the National League kicked off its two-division series on Thursday night.
And Stephen Che joins us from the Sports Center with the results. Stephen.
Hey guys, the MLB playoffs are indeed finally underway, and it was a great start for two teams in particular, starting with the LA Dodgers. The Dodgers, on the back of ace Clayton Kershaw, beat the Atlanta Braves at Turner Field 6-1 in a convincing win. LA jumped ahead early on. The bats came alive while Kershaw, the NL Cy Young favorite, blew away 12 batters and walked 3, giving up a lone run and 3 hits, all in 7 quality innings. It was a picture-perfect start for the Dodgers, with the ball going to Zach Greinke in Game 2 and Ryu Hyun-jin at home in Game 3. Meanwhile, in the other NLDS game, St. Louis steamrolled Pittsburgh 9-1. And closer to home, the Korean Baseball Organization's postseason picture is not yet clear, with just a day left in the regular season. Samsung has secured the top spot, so they'll sit tight until the Korea series, but the second to fourth place teams currently, LG, Tucson, and Nexon, in that order, are still battling for playoff position, crucial to the 3-stage ladder knockout format. It's a must-win situation for the 3 teams battling for second place, with all playing in final crucial games on Saturday. Now let's take a look at Friday's top KBO matchup. The Nexon Heroes took on the Kia Tigers in Gwangju. Nexon needs the win, and Kia's in the way. On to the third, Nexon's big bat Park Byung-ho brings the first runner home. It's 1-0. Now we go to the bottom of the same inning. Kia's Park Ki-nam singles to bring one home. It's 1-1 tied ball game. Now to the fifth, the Heroes Park Byung-ho once again singles to bring another home. Nexon's up by 1, but bottom fifth, the Tigers Lee Bum-ho hits one in. Again, it's tied 2-2. The pattern repeats in the seventh. 3-3. The scores are tied before the Heroes break the deadlock in the 8th, and it's 5-3 with the game still going on in the 9th inning. Now let's take a look at the score for the SK Lotte game, and Lotte defeats SK 7-2. That does it for me here in the Sports Center. This has been Stephen Che. Check back at midnight for the latest in the world of sports.
Let's go over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center to see whether events like the Busan International Film Festival and the Seoul International Fireworks Festival will have good conditions.
Right, it's going to be a busy weekend. Is the weather going to cooperate, Bo-kyung?
Well, rest assured for tomorrow because it should be another fabulous autumn day. First, let's take a look at our satellite map. Well, as you can see, we're seeing absolutely clear skies throughout the country because we're currently under the influence of a high pressure system from the East Sea. Now, we're going to have 2 different weather days over the weekend, though. Tomorrow should be bright and sunny, but Sunday is shaping up to be cloudy and rainy. There may be showers on Jeju Island starting tomorrow late at night, and the showers are expected to gradually spread to the southern regions and Gangwon province on Sunday. Now taking a closer look at tomorrow's forecast, Seoul should get up to 28 degrees. Meanwhile, Daegu and Gwangju should both hit 27. Moving on to other regions, Daejeon and Jeju should make it to the mid-20s, and Mount Kumgang tops out at 17. Well, there should continue to be a big temperature gap of about 15 degrees between the day and night, so please be sure to keep yourselves warm. That's all for now, but join me for another update after midnight.
And that's our broadcast on this Friday night. I'm Yoo Ji-hae in Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for joining us. Have a great evening. We'll see you soon.